Okay, well, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to share our experiences with all of you. Um, as you might know, in Mexico, we did a big transformation. The historic center of Mexico City was abandoned in terms of people living there. There were a lot of commerce going on, but not many people living in the area. It was 70 to 80% empty. It was very run down. There was a problem with the cars, the garbage, the many services. They were in a bad way. It also considered an unsafe place. So the situation had been deteriorating for many years, probably since the 1950s. No, we're talking about the year 2001 when the recovery started. This was an initiative that came from the mayor of Mexico City, who invited Mr. Slim to work in this project. Mr. Slim agreed to work in this project, but he suggested that the president of Mexico was invited. As you know, Mexico City is a place where all the major companies are. The main offices of government are in Mexico City. It's Mexico, the country, is a very centralized country, so a lot of important things go on in the city, and the historic center of Mexico is like the heart of the country. Is where the main plaza is. It's where the president's office is. It's where the mayor's office is. It's the cathedral, the religious monuments, the churches, and there's a lot of business going on in the historic center. No, so what happened? What went on? Basically, there were two instruments that were created that were very, very important. One was a committee, and first there was a board of over 100 people, of intellectuals, historians, leaders, business people, people from communications, from newspapers. There were over 100 people that were invited to participate with ideas, suggestions, and work. There was an executive committee, and this executive committee was represented by 3 persons of the local government, 3 people from the federal government, and 4 people from the society. It was presided by Mr. Carlos Slim, and this executive committee got together every month in order to follow up on the works and to consider what had to be done. Basically, there were 4 big points. The first one was a problem that is going on in the city of Mexico that has to do with water and the administration of the water. And the second was to improve the services in general, security and services in the city center. The third was the social area, the social part, which was to increase the economic and social level of the people that live and work in the area. And the fourth and the main point was the revitalization of the area, which meant that more people would come in to live, to work, to study, and to enjoy the historic center of Mexico. The main idea was to have a very alive historic center that was more visited by more people, obviously in much better conditions in terms of infrastructure and services. No, so the work began, and also two companies, well, 2 institutions were created from the private sector. One was a foundation that I directed for over 20 years, which was the Fundación del Centro Histórico de la Ciudad de México, which was a foundation for the historic center of Mexico City. The other one was a real estate company called Centro Histórico de la Ciudad de México. This real estate company was created in order to be able to buy property, to restore the property, and to give better use, and to be able to use it more adequately. No, this was a private company, but was open for anyone to invest in this company. No, it was an instrument in order for people to participate in the recovery of the historic center. A very important point here was that from the beginning, all the plans and projects were open to the public and were a private-public partnership, which was done at the same time in many ways by the private sector, but following public activities, no? Which meant that there was a lot of investment in infrastructure by the government, but also followed by a lot of investments in the private sector in terms of buildings and new hotels, new restaurants, new office spaces, etc. This executive committee, as I said, would get together every month, and in those meetings, they would touch the important subjects that needed to be addressed in order for the plan to go through. No, if there was somebody else needed, for example, in terms of security, we would invite experts in the subject so that they could share their experiences. We followed not only national experiences, but also international experiences to understand what has happened in successful cases that were able to redo their cities and their areas of some cities like Barcelona, Sisi, Soho, New York, different places that have different experience, many in Latin America, no? Quito in Ecuador, some parts of Colombia in terms of transportation, in Bogota, some other parts in Mexico as well in terms of Mérida. And basically the concept was to bring back people to the historic center, to allow them to have opportunities of work, opportunities in terms of housing, and a lot of entertainment and a lot of new activities in art, music, and also new places for people to study. There was a new university created in the historic center so that there were more students working and living in the area. Actually, what we did is that we divided up the historic center into different corridors. One was the financial corridor, in which the concept was to have financial institutions set up. There were this area was a little bit in an upper level kind of area where you have a nicer restaurants, nicer housing, nicer apartments, and this was a very touristic area as well. So there were new hotels. Then we created a cultural corridor, which the new university was set up, Universidad del Claustro de Sor Juana. Well, actually, it wasn't new, but it grew from 1,000 students to over 4,000 students in a very short time. It was a university that we helped them get a credit and get new spaces so that they could grow and have more students and more professors. And around this cultural corridor, also we try to invite artists, young people, professors, teachers, new galleries, new spaces for libraries, for painters, for people to be able to work in different types of culture. This was more like a student place, a student area. They had small cafes, they had cafeterias, they had a lot of events going on in this area. And this allowed for to be created housing in a more affordable way, no? Then there was this entertainment corridor, which in this part of the historic center is where the old theaters used to be. And what we did here was to invest in these theaters so that a new offer of entertainment was available. Plays, music, concerts, dance, entertainment in general. The idea was to create like a Mexican Broadway, but the interesting thing is that this already existed. It was just in a bad shape and without activity. So basically what we tried to do in general was to use the available infrastructure and bring it back to life, you know? Sometimes to its original use, and sometimes we would change the use. There is a saying that says that a building has to make a living, which means that a building has to be used. A building that it's empty, it only costs money and is difficult to maintain. So what we tried to do was to try to make sure that each building had a proper use in terms of the right commerce, the right office, the right housing, the right prices, so that a building would be able to maintain itself through time. And then there was the technological corridor. The technological corridor, what we try to do is invite companies related to technology, so to be able to set up shop in this place, and there was an incentive, a fiscal incentive from the government, that they were able to reduce the taxes in payroll. So in the end, there were around 8,000 new jobs created in this area. And so this is parts of the concepts that were being done in order to bring people back to the historic center. No, what we did over 10 years, it was that the population in this area grew by 15%. There were around 15 new jobs created in this area. And the investment done from the private sector, the good thing is that it was around 20 times the investment done by the government. So as you can see, what we can take away from this is that, in my opinion, when you have a project that it's done by the private together with the public sector, what this creates is a security, so people are willing to invest and to follow up with the projects. No, when people saw that this was going on, people started to invest in their own property, to renew the buildings, to change. Most of them were used like for warehouses or just empty spaces. So what they started to do is invest in their buildings so that they would use them instead of just leaving them like that. No, but many people had inherited buildings or had them in their family for many years, but they were not used properly. So what we were able to do is to convince people to use them and to invest in this area. No, from the government side, there were two offices created. One was the Authority for the Historic Center. This was an office that was new, was created mainly to take care of the historic center and look after all the main things that happen in the historic center, no, especially in terms of infrastructure, security, services, etc. There was also another company from the government that was called the Fideicomiso Centro Histórico, which is like a trust. And this trust was basically done in order for the government to be able to spend money in public places like parks, streets, facades, uh, projects that, like, for example, to illuminate some buildings, to do projects in transportation, etc. That the government, it was like a mechanism in order to allow to raise funds for public investments, no? Also for cleaning places, cleaning spaces, etc. No, so they would coordinate the fideicomiso together with the authority, and they would also get together constantly to see what was going on in terms of security services, neighbors, what were the complaints, noise, traffic, pedestrians, criminal activity, public vendors, street vendors, mainly, basically to be able to have a direct communication with the people that live and work in the historic center, and to be able to satisfy their needs. No, before these two offices were created, basically everything was done by the central government, and this would get lost because the city of Mexico is so big that there wasn't a special authority for the historic center, that many activities would get lost in the size of the big city. No, so if you create this office specially for the historic center, it's like you put people that take care of only in this area. No, so you're making sure that this area is well managed, safe, clean, well illuminated, the services are working. In the historic center of Mexico is the most visited place probably in the country. They say that sometimes the 2 million people can go in a day, within a day. It's where people go to buy. There's a lot of activity going on in terms of cultural activities. There are over 70 museums in this area. There are over 70 churches in this area, many hotels, many offices from the government, and offices in general. No, so these were the instruments that were used and created during this period. And if you want, I can go back. First, the executive committee. This executive committee was created to take care of the plan of the recovery of the historic center, to take care of the execution of the plan. This committee created publicly and privately four people from the private sector and 6 people from the government, 3 from the federal government and 3 from the local government. This committee would get together every month to work on things that had to improve in the historic center. Then, as I would repeat, the 2 companies that were created from the private sector, a real estate company to acquire property and land to develop it and to improve it and to renew it, a foundation that would work in cultural and social activities, health, education, sports, working with the people that live in the area so that they could improve their social level, to improve social activity in general, to lower criminal activity, and to improve the natural family activities. No, we would work with festivities, traditions, Mexican traditions, and to try to make a healthier and more family style activities in the area. No, and then from the public sector, the authority for the historic center and the fideicomiso, which is a trust. The authority, as I said, to take care of everything that would happen in the historic center, and the trust, a fund to invest in public things that are needed in general. No, the results is that after 3 or 4 years, the vision and the perception of what the historic center was changed, and people to look to the historic center as a place of opportunities, as a place that was changing and as a place that needed to get renewed. Also, a couple of years later, you would see many investments going on. Streets that before were dirty, were abandoned, were in a very bad shape. After a couple of years, you would see newcomers, people moving into these areas. There were many streets that became pedestrians, that the cars were not allowed back in, and this allowed for the streets to have coffees, gallerias, people walking in the streets, etc., more security. We did a very important work in terms of security. We put together with the government cameras on top of the buildings and an office, special office dedicated to follow these cameras to see what was the activity in this place. And we lowered the activities of criminals and made the historic center very safe. No? Also, the police was better paid and better trained and with more equipment of radio technology so they could communicate better. And the police were also able to track the patrol cars. So there was this important activity going on in terms of security. All this together in general is what made people more secure about the historic center. I would say that now the historic center is very, very alive. Probably is one street that is probably the most active in terms of commerce and in terms of people walking by. Tourism is flourishing. There are many new hotels being opened, new restaurants, new shops, new galleries, and there is more people living in the historic center. And there has been a lot of private investment done in the historic center, and all this thanks to the realization that the project was real, that the investment was real, that the things that were being said were happening. And I think that this is what it's important to understand and to comprehend that if you have a proper plan of basically based on the needs of the area, you have to analyze and see what's going on to understand what are the issues, and then start working on them. Because the result is that it can be done. In Mexico City and the Historic Center had many complicated problems, but you start to address them one by one, and if there is a will, there is a way, no? And basically the good thing about the public-private partnership is that one looks after the other. No, you as a private sector, you have to make sure that the public sector is doing their work, and the public would also only works if the private sector is investing and doing things. No, but together it makes them very, very strong and very powerful, and it's just like a beautiful cycle, because everything starts to make sense, and criminality lowers, people move back in, prices starts to increase. It's like a virtuous cycle, no? And I think that if that's what happened in other parts of the city, it can be done. Usually, you have the infrastructure, no? So basically, it's just to improve. It's like if you have an old car that is run down and you do a restoration. You change the things that are not working and make them better. So in general, that's the whole plan, and I think that probably would be good from here to go to questions and answers.